All right. So, Sigh's Shiki, if that's how you pronounce it, is their 12th album. This is a progressive metal band, best known for their start at the beginning of the second wave of black metal. Uh, so their style reflects history throughout their discography. They did become quite a bit more famous for their well, for a couple of reasons. The first one is that they're associated with Death Like Silence Productions early on. Um, for me, I discovered them through Wild Rags, so it was different the way I saw it. But, you know, where they were and where they are two very different things. So, yes, it's important to emphasize they were an important, interesting band who have pretty much stood the test of time. But in 1994, 1997, 1999, somewhere in there, they became a progressive sort of art metal band. And judging by the way that progressive black metal sounds today, they were a very influential one. And especially if we consider the more jazz influenced things that have happened over the years, the sort of the kitchen sink approach, which is more of a Zappa kind of thing that we just don't see. We don't really see that much before Psy. We so we see abstraction for sure, but they became very popular for this style of progressive metal. People call it avant-garde. Uh, Sometimes, definitely, but there's more of a progressive sensibility there for most of their albums. So instead of going through 12 albums to get to this point, I think it's important to see most like any band, the point of peak popularity sort of finds diminishing returns afterwards because people are returning to them for something they want, and most artists are prone to sort of expand on their idea, but probably kind of stick with the musical personality that got them noticed most. Um, in this sense, uh, Imaginary Sonicscape is definitely a unique album in their discography. They kind of brought back a lot of that frantic energy on Insomnophobia many years later. It's one of their most popular albums, and more notably, because I was very interested in the band at that time, when Graveward hit, it was a total different side of the band that maybe a lot of newer fans didn't really understand at the time. And there's a lot of things that are echoed in this new album, Shiki, that there are in Graveward, which is seen as it's sort of incorrectly seen as a more straightforward album, even though it just starts heavier. And that's kind of the same deal with this one. It starts out heavier. Um, the main musician behind it, Mirai, uh, definitely had to go with session musicians for this album. Um, and it's given it, they haven't lost the sort of Psy sound that's developed over since probably, I would say, about 2007. We kind of see that same sort of, that was a sweet spot for the production and um, getting all the dynamic of everything that they do to work together. But that you will find hints of Hail Horror Hail. You will find hints of Grave Words, uh, and part of that is due to the sort of heavier, more precise black metal angle they lean into here about 40% of the time. Um, while the progressive rock influences become a little more prominent, whereas we step away from some of the avant-garde showmanship in some regards. It's easy to get numbed to just how expressive a lot of Psy's music is when you listen to the discography. What's what is wildly different and insane in the moment might seem pretty normal once you've, like I did. I just kicked right through all about 10 albums in full. So the thing about this album is that I could sort of go through their history all I want, but really it feels very much a continuation of the previous album, which I believe was Air to Despair. And what I mean is there's more of the progressive leaning stuff, the sort of some touches of electronic fusion, and a more sentimental tonality, which for an avant-garde band, sentimentality and a sense of self is sort of destructive rather than interesting in a lot of cases. So I have my own philosophy on that, and that is a lot of nonsense to most people. The thing is that this is, yeah, it's a heavier album to start. The first three songs are very guitar driven. We get the weird side of Sigh no matter what through in every song, but there are the standouts are obviously chosen, and I think it says something that on the second single for the album they cut out the weird half of the piece. They cut it down to one song on the dual song track. So maybe they felt it was trite to include it. I think it would have caught a lot more ears and been more interesting. But Satsui itself is a cool song, so I get it. Um, the song kind of convinced me that this was a worthwhile kind of living up to the hype of the band, and their legacy was probably Fuyu Gakuru. Um, just because of the dynamic of it. It is sort of a dark metal song in a lot of ways, but a very elaborate avant-garde idea of one. And that's very much kind of like in the Bethlehem side of things, not the dark metal specifically. Um, but that will be a personal choice to make if you see that comparison there. Um, I found it less psychedelic and more introspective than usual. I found it, as a longtime fan, just a bit average, I would say, and lacking those, I guess, more elaborate streaks of insanity that we get in albums like Insomnophobia and Grave Words, and before that, Hail Horror Hail even. Um, so we're definitely going to a heavier place, but not one that I'd found so inspiring. I think the thought behind the album, the meditations upon death, the aging into his 50s is definitely influenced the themes and the artistic reach of the album. And I don't know how interesting that's going to be to anyone but those who followed the career all the way through. So if you're 20 and you land on an album that is meditating upon the ephemera of life and the um, sort of acceptance of aging and those sorts of things, I don't know that it will thrill you to sit there and think about it. But if you're probably up there, probably in the 35 to 50 range, you're going to kind of get the sort of heart of this album. And my only thing is that it seems it's just maybe a bit of a, not the most, maybe not that it's too serious for Psy, but it's a little bit too sentimental. I've always seen their mindset as sort of like burning through the sort of typical traditional viewpoints on things, and this takes a very traditional point of view, which is really pretty in its own deranged, mayhemic, avant-garde, black metal, whatever thing. So um, there's a lot of interest there. I think that musically there's just a lot of filler at the end of the album, and I don't think the session musicians make any sense here. Other than being very professional studio musicians who are in bands like Loud Blast and Creator and Malignancy and whatnot. So that's cool. But yeah, I mean, I've been wanting another album that reminded me of Graveword for a while. Am I saying that? That's the right title. Yeah, I've been wanting another album that was a bit like Graveword for a while because I felt like it was people kind of turned away from it too quickly, and I think that this reprises some of the best parts of that without throwing in the rest of the kitchen sink. So easy to recommend, but it's not. It really didn't blow me away or resonate with me so much as it reinforced that existing fandom that I have for the band. If you don't have that, probably start by just taking piecemeal from various records and finding the sound and approach that catches your ear quickest. Because there's a world within each album to explore, and this isn't the most imposing or exciting uh, place to start in that regard. So definitely check it out. But it's not the be all end all for Sigh just yet.